Distance learning has to do with using technology to enable learning for the learner anywhere and anytime, where instruction is separated by time and space. The goal of distance learning, and any learning really, is making sense of the material presented in order to foster meaningful learning. So, how do we keep learners' attention when we don't have them in the room in front of us? An important way to do that is to use multimedia learning. Multimedia learning means learning from words and pictures, so auditory and visual stimuli. This also takes into consideration cognitive load, specifically the limitations on our working memory. In order to do that, we need to engage learners to get their attention. Primarily, this is done using the words and pictures from a sensory stimuli perspective. But then we have to continue with that engagement to start to use cognitive processing in order to build comprehension on top of previous learning. What exactly is the cognitive theory of multimedia learning? Well, it refers broadly to learning supported by various forms of visual and verbal content when presented in combination. So, it in essence means the pictures and the words put together in ways that create a structure for learning for your student. And that creates the cognitive structures that allow new information to be built on top of old prior knowledge. And this engages students actively in learning in order to create stronger comprehension. We have to take into consideration the idea that there is limited capacity for working memory. About 5 to 7 chunks is the current experimental value. And so the idea of dual coding, using both the pathways of auditory and the pathways of visual in the brain in terms of processing, allows for both of these channels to overcome a single channel limitation on working memory, which increases attention and learning. By minimizing extraneous processing in terms of cognitive load, we're increasing student attention and we're providing a framework to build that knowledge structure within the learner's mind. And that's where the cognitive structure generation becomes so important. And presentation reinforces this cognitive structure that learners will be creating for themselves as they attain, engage, and interact with multimedia material. What is the dual coding theory based on? It's based on Alan Paiveo's research regarding the dual channel theory and use of pictures, which is a visual driven stimulus, and words, an auditory driven stimulus, in order to then bring these two channels to bear when we present material. And this will increase the working memory potential for learners to increase attention through these sensory stimuli channels or pathways, and thereby increasing the working memory capacity, overcoming some of its limitations while acknowledging and applying the idea of cognitive load. All of this is to create knowledge in the brain, in long term memory specifically, in order to be able to create schema that then learners can generate new knowledge and solve new problems upon this framework. The idea of cognitive load in terms of intrinsic, extraneous, and germane, specifically, we're thinking of extraneous because this is what the designer can impact. And by reducing extraneous cognitive load, this allows focus of the generation for knowledge structures. That increases learning, decreases the barriers to that learning, and makes the emphasis on attention, interaction, engagement, where students then can continue to grow their knowledge base and do active learning, which is a cognitive process that students engage in with the materials delivered in a distance learning setting through technology. So, how can we look at this active processing when we gain attention and students are engaged through multimedia tools and theories? Well, we really think about the idea of this active cognitive processing in three ways. Number one, selecting, where the attention is focused on the material. So students aren't thinking on multiple things, confusing them and making the task difficult. Number two is organizing that material or creating mental models, these knowledge structures, which take the important information and put them together into a comprehensive whole. That comprehensive whole is integrating. And this is where the active process of selecting, organizing, and integrating creates this complete cognitive structure that's built on prior knowledge. So these components are really important for learning, especially when we're using technology in a distance learning setting. So this active processing, reinforced through engagement of the student, increasing their attention, increasing their selection, organization, and integration of material into knowledge structures, which is active learning. And this is all supported by an interactive environment. But ultimately, none of these things matter if students aren't motivated to learn. They're going to want to be engaged, activating their own attention, staying engaged with the material, organizing, and then integrating through these cognitive processes.